Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Korean Atlanta Mentorship. In many of our videos, we always talk about the importance of mindset. And one of the things that I always like to emphasize is that you have to think highly of yourself, and no one else is going to do that for you. So, just by your existence, you have to think of yourself as a king or a queen. And if you don't, there's going to be a lot of bad consequences to that, right? And I'm not going to go over all of them, but what I want to just kind of share with you is a passage from a book called The True Believer by Eric Hoffer. And I actually don't recommend reading the book entire because it's a little bit depressing. But this book was written in the 1950s about people who join mass movements and go crazy and do whatever, right? And so let me just kind of read this little section here. A feeling of superiority counteracts imitation. Had the millions of immigrants who came to this country been superior people, the cream of the countries they came from, there would have not been one USA, but a mosaic of lingual and cultural groups. It was due to the fact that the majority of the immigrants were the lowest and the poorest, the despised and the rejected, that the heterogeneous millions blended so rapidly and thoroughly. They came here with the ardent desire to shed their old identity and to be reborn to a new life, and they were automatically equipped with an unbounded capacity to imitate and adopt the new. The strangeness of the new country attracted rather than repelled them. They craved a new identity and a new life, and the stranger, um, the more it suited their inclination. Perhaps to the non-Anglo-Saxons, the strangeness of the language was an added attraction. To have to learn to speak enhanced the illusion of being born anew. So what this is saying is that the people who came to this country in general, I'm not saying all of them, did not think highly of themselves or were not from a class because every country has like a class system, right? Or a caste system or whatever we want to call it, where they were brainwashed by their own society to not think highly of themselves. In fact, that happens in this country today. I mean, who are the people who hate this country the most? Usually young people who for some reason think that this is the worst country on earth and that every other society is perfect. And so because they don't have the mindset that this is a superior country, um, notice how like there's a degradation on many fronts and ends, right? And so for me, I always thought like I come from a superior place, and it may have been me being delusional, but California in the 90s, you remember like songs by Tupac like California Love, and the fact that every single person at that time wanted to live in California. Then, for whatever reason, over throughout the years, people just did not value or think that what they had was superior, right? And so they just didn't take care of their hometown. They didn't take care of their own place. They didn't value their own culture, their roots, right? And essentially, we were just kind of making the same mistakes of the past of our ancestors, where they only came to this country because for wherever they came from, they were not from a high class of people. And those thoughts and cultural norms essentially just eventually took over again, right? There was a time period in this country where we thought we were the best at whatever we did, right? And now that feeling isn't there anymore. I mean, right now, all we do, and think about like let's say the movie industry, we just copy what was done in the past, right? So if you take a look at this first sentence here, a feeling of superiority counteracts imitation. And this applies to everything from the language that you speak, where you believe you're from, your cultural norms and values. Do you believe that they're superior, or do you believe that they're nothing and you have to always imitate what someone else is doing? And if you are always feeling that whatever someone else has is better, that's actually going to cause problems and actually social destabilization. Like, not even kidding. And so one of the things that I just kind of identified about maybe some three consequences of not thinking highly of yourself, because I've said this before, it doesn't matter what reality is, you have to think of yourself as a king or queen and no matter what you do. right? It might not be your actual title, not your actual status, but at least mentally up there, you have to think highly of yourself. And three consequences that I talk about is one, if you don't, there's going to be cultural degradation. So think about what happened in California, where back in the 90s, everybody thought that they were superior. Best beaches, best weather, look at all the cool restaurants that we have. And then for whatever reason, just maybe 10, 15 years later, people are doing everything that they can to escape the place, right? Net population lost 2021 for the first time. And that's because the people who ran the place just did not think highly of themselves and kept making poorer and poorer decisions, which also leads to economic degradation of not, that's another consequence of thinking highly of yourself. So think about like negotiation, getting a job, or even running a business. How do you do those things if you don't think highly of yourself? Because you have to do an insane amount of marketing and have the mindset to be able to say no to bad offers. People who are poor, in my opinion, and again, it's not necessarily their fault, are poor because they're trained to say yes to bad offers, right? And it's because they don't think highly of themselves. You ever like hear nonsensical advice from when you're a kid, like, oh, you should get any job, even if it's minimum wage, because then, and then once you get that job, you should be so grateful because of X, Y, and Z, right? That's a person who raised you to not think highly of yourself. Therefore, it's probably the reason why, if you are broke, right, it comes from a long line of things that you were brainwashed to believe from a young kid. Another consequence of not thinking highly of yourself is actually linguistic degradation, right? So you'll notice nowadays that they're very much trying to change how language works. And I'm not going to get too much into specifics, but because people don't have a firm grasp of their own self and cultural values, they'll just accept changes in the language, and within one or two generations, the way that the language is spoken is either going to be completely gone, which happens with a lot of immigrant groups, especially with Koreans in America, or even with the language of the native population, it just drastically changes from one moment to the next. You can already see that. And here's the thing, just because your ancestors may have not thought highly of yourself doesn't mean you should continue that line of thinking, right? I mean, think about this. When I was a kid, I was like, why is it that like nobody around me seems to care? In people in my situation where we were born here and we grew up in this country, why no one seems to care about learning Korean, right? And it's probably because the people before us didn't value it. Therefore, the next generation did it. But you only have one life to live. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you. So, am I gonna live this life thinking that I am not superior, or I am not proud of who I am, or I am not, I'm just gonna live this life just as a slug with absolutely no values, culture, nothing to share with other people? No, I don't care what the ancestors did if they didn't think highly of themselves or they came from a low social class, because I am a king, right? And I know that sounds totally delusional, but that's the kind of thing that you have to have if you're not if you don't want to suffer the consequences that I just talked about. All right, hopefully this makes sense and I'm not totally delusional. All right, so if you're interested in joining our group, go ahead and click the Google form link below, and we will speak to you next time. And hopefully this isn't highly controversial. And so have a great day. What day is today? Friday. Happy Friday, and I'll just keep cranking out videos. Bye, everybody.